Ghostwire Tokyo has officially been delayed into 2022, being the next game in the long list of game delays because of COVID. So why did COVID affect game delays? Why did it affect studios that much? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Steve Saylor, I'm blind, and if you're wondering how I'm able to play video games if I'm blind, if you take a look at the video here and the video is not there, click the link in the description down below to see exactly what I see when I'm playing video games. And also make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the like button if you like this video. So yes, Ghostwire Tokyo being officially delayed into 2022, not something that that is uncommon now. We've seen a lot of games being delayed or pushed because of COVID, because of the pandemic. I do want to be able to bring up Ghostwire Tokyo's official announcement that they just posted today as of this recording. They posted an image with text that basically says, Ghostwire Tokyo, we've made the decision to delay the launch of Ghostwire Tokyo to early 2022. We want to get the game in your hands as soon as possible so you can experience the unforgettable version of the Haunted Tokyo that we've been hard at work building. At the same time, we've also focused on protecting the health of everyone at Tango. Our new release window will give us time to bring the world of Ghostwire Tokyo to life as we've always envisioned it. Thank you for being patient as we work to bring you an experience unlike anything else we've ever made. We can't wait to show you more in the coming months. From Tango Gameworks. So yes, once again, Ghostwire being delayed, totally fine in my own personal opinion. I've seen a lot of delays and I'm totally okay with that because the pandemic really did affect a lot of games, pretty much 100% across the board over the past year and a half. And I think we're going to start to see more games being delayed even further, even like games that could potentially be coming out this year. And the question kind of comes up, why did COVID affect the studios that much? What was going on behind the scenes at studios that really affected a lot of these delays? Well, I'm actually going to be talking to Parris Lilly from Gamertag Radio and Kind of Funny XCast, and we're going to discuss exactly that. So let's jump into that conversation. All right, so thanks, Parris, for joining me on this thing. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no. Thank you for having me. It's awesome that you and I get to actually converse about gaming and not just in Clubhouse. So this should be fun.
Exactly. So I wanted to bring up a tweet that you had mentioned in regards to game delays. Obviously, Ghostwire Tokyo being the new addition to the list of games that have been delayed into 2022 and beyond. So what are your thoughts about games obviously being delayed for the past year and a half? And this is kind of being the norm in regards to how COVID really affected games releases this past year.
I mean, for me, it's something that's been top of mind for a while now because you have to look at the impact of COVID-19 taking these game studios that you have people that are used to collaborating and working together in person every day inside a studio. And now you're just literally dispersing them all over the world and you're having them collaborate remotely, disrupting workflow. Some of these studios, probably a lot of them, clearly weren't prepared to have people working remotely. So you had to ramp up for that. You had to get the right equipment in place. Just everything that you take into account when you look at the complexity that is game development, and to think that these things, nothing's going to be slowed down or change, just didn't make sense. So I came into 2021 just assuming that the majority of the games that we were expecting this year would be delayed. And Ghostwire Tokyo, when I saw that news today, honestly, I was surprised we didn't hear it sooner. You know what I mean? So yeah, none of this surprises me. And the tweet that I put out is, I think people should just go in expecting games to be delayed versus being disappointed that they were delayed. So if something doesn't get delayed, it's actually a happy surprise. You should be excited about that. So it's just a part of it. Game development is very complex. It's not easy. A lot of these things don't come together until the very last minute. And now you're doing it in a completely remote environment and you're expecting workflow to not be disrupted. I remember, speaking of Clubhouse, and I'm forgetting her name, but she's the head of EA's, basically all their game studios. She was in there one night and she was talking specifically about EA and just how much it's disrupted them. And this was, God, what, 6 months ago she was talking about this. Mm-hmm. But she was even saying, I mean, you're just depending on the studio and just how mature the studio has been. Like, I think she used DICE as an example. Even DICE, a studio that's been around for a very long time, obviously very senior leadership there. they were seeing even their workflow disrupted, up, what was it, 25 to 30%. And she was saying some other studios, she didn't say by name, as much as 60 and 70% because they weren't used to working remote. We even had Pete Hines on XCast a couple weeks ago, and I directly asked him, I'm like, I would love to hear the Bethesda perspective on this, working in this new remote environment. He said it's been tough for all of their studios, and obviously Ghostwire, Tango is a Bethesda studio, and here we go. We're seeing it's delayed. Deathloop got delayed. Starfield, everyone was, oh, this game's going to come in 2021. I'm like, no, it's not. I never thought it was going to come in 2021. And we see that's delayed all the way until the end of 2022. So none of this is a surprise to me. The best advice I would give anyone is embrace your backlog. I guarantee you there's a bunch of games that you've not played yet from the past that you could discover now and check out. And when these new games come out, they come out. I mean, obviously we'll play them. We'll be excited for them when they happen. But I'm not disappointed in anything that gets delayed right now because nothing should shock anyone. Like I don't think this is going to happen, but it wouldn't shock me if Halo got delayed into 2022. It wouldn't shock me if Horizon Forbidden West gets, delayed into 2022. To me, Danny and I joke about this all the time. COVID, there's no rules. There's no rules to any of this. You can't have any kind of expectation because working remote in a complex environment that is game development is hard. And that's what people, in my opinion, need to understand and wrap their heads around.
Yeah, I think even from my side, whenever I've consulted with studios and kind of knowing a bit of the development side, people don't realize how much work was involved in basically moving from a studio environment to a work from home environment. Yeah. There was a lot of IT infrastructure that had to be created. There had to be a lot of abilities to be able to either connect to a server at home or to their computer from home, but then make it also secure. I mean, I remember when Cyberpunk had that huge leak, and I would totally be willing to bet that was due to some sort of unsecure network connection between a developer working at home and to being into the studio. And also that we also don't even realize that as well, because the new consoles even came out with PS5 and Xbox Series X, there was very limited amount of development kits that were available, and there was a lot of studios where the policy was you cannot take those dev kits home, especially because they weren't even out yet until the end of 2020. So there was very limited amount of work that was able to be done. And then if you even jump to Japanese developers and people at Nintendo, essentially there are times that studios and teams that they did not want to work from home. They preferred to work in studio because that's when they work best. So they decided to opt out of working from home. So I think you're right in the fact that we need to expand upon our backlog over the next little bit. I mean, I know there's plenty of games that I haven't played, and you mentioned interesting something about the even the possibility of Halo being delayed. Of course, we would not want to, because it's the 20th anniversary of not only Xbox but of Halo, and that would be a really great moment for Halo fans to see that coming out this year. But you're right, there is always that possibility that it could get delayed again because of COVID, and this is something I think that is going to be affecting the industry for at least, I would say, the next 2 to maybe even 3 years for moving forward. And even on the accessibility side, that's something that I know for a fact that all of pretty much for 6 to 8 months of last year, all accessibility consultation basically stopped because they had other things they had to worry about, and just being able to work from home, let alone being able to have consultants being able to kind of come in and talk to studios about accessibility. So what are some of the kind of finals our talk here? What are some of the games that you feel that would have you think are going to be better suited for being delayed kind of outside of COVID? Obviously we saw Cyberpunk would have been better if there was another delay. But what other games do you think that you think, okay, this is going to be a much better game because of this and not necessarily because of COVID?
I think right off the top, actually, let me circle back to the previous topic because I wanted to throw another thing in. Another disruptive thing of working remotely from home is people with families and children, and why it just, all the real life stuff that you go to work so you can be isolated from you're having to deal with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is not easy. Like my wife might walk in here right now thinking I'm doing nothing, but that's just the point, right?
Yeah.
But going to what you're saying, I mean, like we already talked about Halo. That clearly, that was the game that needed to be delayed, and just COVID and everything that happened with that made sense. You bring up Cyberpunk, that game has no business being out right now, let alone having a slight delay. You know what I mean? So those are top of mind. Like I brought up Starfield earlier. I think them smartly pushing that out we're looking at another almost 18 months made sense. You know, give them the time that they need. I think we even look like even here recently during COVID, look at Ratchet and Clank. Ratchet and Clank was slated to be in a launch window game, and it didn't come out until June. Deathloop we see is not coming out until September now. These are clear signs of games that benefited, that needed more time, that let's not rush these things to market, because again, let's just use Cyberpunk as an example. I usually avoid talking about it, but Cyberpunk should have been delayed. It was pretty much the last bits of its development happened during the peak times of COVID and people working remotely and still ramping up the infrastructure to be able to support it. That game had no business coming out when it did. And we see what the result was. And we see how that has literally just shook the industry as a whole. I mean, Cyberpunk will forever be the lessons learned on why you don't rush a game to market. And that's unfortunate, because obviously I was a huge fan. I'm still a huge fan of the game in that studio. But that's a lessons learned on take your time. Don't rush this, especially during everything that just happened with COVID. And like we said, building out the infrastructure. Now we can look a year later now. People have gotten, it's become more of a norm now to work from home. And I'm sure the workflows and everything are a lot better now, but still doesn't make it easy, you know? So absolutely. Like I look at a game, like I said, when I talk about Horizon Forbidden West, wouldn't shock me if it got delayed into 2022. And I think, again, for everything that we're talking about right now, Sony already smartly delayed Gran Turismo 7 into 2022, because clearly, why are we rushing this thing in this environment? Take your time, take your lumps now, so that when we do get into 2022 and beyond, these games get the proper time that they need for development and QA and everything else that goes along with that. So like, let's look, and again, I'm just pulling games out of my butt at this point, but like look at a game like Redfall. Redfall is slated to come out in summer 2022. Right now, wouldn't shock me if that winds up being delayed further, because they realize as they get closer to that time frame, they still need more time, because again, workflow working remotely is going to be slowed down. Like, I can tell you this, when I was up in Seattle filming the Xbox stuff, I had a conversation with a certain person at a certain studio about a certain game. And we talked about this, and he explained to me how much their game development got slowed down because of COVID and working remotely. And he used a great example of, think about play testing. Like when, like if you make a certain change to something, like they do a play test and like, oh, we should fix this. And then they go back and they fix it. You check it in and everyone's in the studio. You immediately start playing it right away and see if it works. He goes, well, with COVID, oh, we'll play test something. Hey, we think we should change this. Now it has to be uploaded and checked in, and then it has to go through this whole process. So instead of getting that instant, all right, let's just go run into the playtest studio and check out this change, now it has to happen overnight. And now instead of doing this 2 or 3 times a day, you only get to do it once or twice a week.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Just as that example right there shows you how much it can slow down progress of a game, you know, just by simply tweaking something in the game. In, you know, where now you could have instantly, you know, tested it. Now it may take days before you get to test something like that. So that was just an example from one person at one studio about a game. Imagine all the other stories that we would hear about the potential slowdowns of games because of COVID-19 and working remotely. Add all that stuff up. Like here's probably my best way to sum it up. If a game took 3 years to make during COVID, it probably takes 5 years to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the math. It's just the math of it, you know, because things get slowed down. So what I think we're going to see is, and you brought up the great point before, you know, we just had a new hardware come out and there was all these slated games that were probably going to come out in the next 18 months, since launch. Now they're probably 24 to 36 months out just because of COVID. Yeah. And that's just realistic. I mean, you have to think that way. A lot of the games that we thought we were going to get in 2021 and 2022 are probably 2023, 2024 at this point.
Yep. And I'll even add on to what you were saying in regards to like into testing and play testing, because I'll even give like I have a personal example, because when Mass Effect Legendary Edition came out, I like you basically had a review copy of the game before it came out, and I was playing it, but I was also playing it on Xbox with my Series X with the Xbox wireless headset, and I actually discovered a bug that when you are in the main sort of hub menu for Mass Effect, that if you have the wireless headset turned on, the game is confused and think that that's actually a controller instead of an actual headset. So and when I talked to some people at BioWare about it, they were able to fix it and eventually add a hotfix to the game when it kind of came out. But it was something that it was that they didn't have the dev kit. A lot of dev kits were available for work from home. They didn't even have a lot of wireless headsets that they could be able to even test out stuff like that. So like COVID really kind of like extended a lot of sort of that development cycle that normally, like you said, would take like probably 6 months to do, take like a year to do, basically just double that in and of itself. And even kind of moving forward, I kind of also want to even mention that there are some good sort of cases of games that were able to embrace the COVID delay. I mean, I remember Mike and Greg had a conversation with the Rare folks from Sea of Thieves on XCast when they talked about the fact that the entire Pirate's Life expansion was all done mostly through COVID, and there are times that like and good wins for that. But I mean that of course that's in this particular case, it's kind of the exception, not necessarily the rule. It just depends on how studios are able to sort of jump in on it and kind of quickly they can kind of regain the ground that they have lost.
Yeah, completely agree with everything you're saying. And yeah, you brought up a great example with that Sea of Thieves. And let's be real. I don't know how much you've played it, but Tall Tale 2 is buggy. Yes. And, that was unfortunate. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the reality that we're in. Probably as much as they play tested and tried to QA, things are still going to slip through the cracks in that way. Even Ratchet & Clank had some bugs in it. Phenomenal game, but it wasn't perfect. And this is where not being able to collaborate in person and do multiple QA playtesting sessions that you typically were able to do 2 years ago, you can't do now.
Exactly.
So that extends out the time of being able to properly QA and test these games, especially like I think of Starfield. Let's go back to that one for a second. I think that coming like here's again, no inside in knowledge. Sure, this is just my wacky theory. That game is probably closer to being, you could probably play that game from start to finish right now, right? But you use this extra time for polish and most importantly QA. What has been one of the big reputation of Bethesda games over the past decade or so? They come in hot, they come in buggy. They clearly don't want to do that with Starfield this time. So in this current environment that we're in with COVID, maybe it would have been 6 months extra they could have used, so it would have been early 2022 of QA and play testing and bug squashing and things like that to get it as polished as possible at launch. But then they realized, why are we rushing that in this remote environment? We need more time to do that. All right, we're going to give it till November of 2022. And that obviously from everything we've heard that was Todd Howard's call, which is great. But to me, I now have an expectation that when Starfield does come out in 2022, it's going to be a very polished thing to start. But even with that, some things are still going to slip through the cracks. It's just the reality of creating such a complex and big, and what we assume is going to be a very big and expansive game. So that's where I come into all of this. And I constantly talk about, and I try to say to our audience that nothing in game development will be perfect. You have to understand that. Delays are okay. If anything, I'm not that I'm happy there's the delay, but I have empathy for a delay. I understand why there's delays, especially in this environment right now, because at the end of the day, Miyamoto said it best, and I'm going to screw up what he said, but basically, a buggy, what does he see? I'm screwing it up already, but you know what I'm saying? Like a rush game is forever, whatever he says, but a delayed game can be better. I completely butchered that. I'm sorry, but I
can't even remember the exact quote either. So no, but the sentiment is there.
Yeah. But his whole point on that is don't rush games. If a game needs more time, give it more time, because you're not going to remember 5 years from now that the game got delayed a year. You're going to remember 5 years from now, like Cyberpunk, that it was a buggy hot mess when it came out. No one wants that. That's the whole point.
Yeah. So case in point, basically embrace the delay, jump into your backlog, because there's probably some games that you missed out just over the past few years, and I'm definitely doing that. So is there one game that you're playing right now that's in your backlog that you're enjoying?
You know what? Because I was actually just playing it last night. I've been playing Wolfenstein again.
You jumped back into that.
Yeah. I was actually just last night. I was just playing it, and that's an older game, but now with Bethesda on Game Pass and everything, we talk about this a lot. There's a lot of hidden gem Bethesda games that I think people are like. Prey is a great example of that. Both Dishonored's, the Wolfenstein games that people can now go jump back into and play and discover these gems that you might have missed the first time around.
Exactly. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Parris. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Again, thank you for having me. I'm glad that you and I finally got a chance to converse. It's always fun.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much to Parris Lilly for joining me today. If you want to be able to follow him and keep up with all the stuff that he's doing online, links to him will be in the description down below, including his work on Gamertag Radio and on Kinda Funny and Kinda Funny XCast. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments or questions about this video, please leave them in the description down below. In the description? No, and leave them in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it the like button and hit the subscribe button to be able to see new videos from me, and also to be able to hit the bell notification icon to be notified as to when new videos come out. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and as always, I remain obediently yours. Bye.